Everyone, there are a lot of indications that more heads will roll in the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited as the new chief executive officer says that the reorganization will begin to shape things in the upstream, gas, and power, new energy downstream, and the non-energy businesses. Of course, President Tinubu made the appointment just earlier today, appointing a new board of Nnpc and, of course, the new chief executive officer. But what we can see from 1999 to 2019, we've seen those gentlemen, Nigerians, who, of course, have served as the chief executive officers of the Nnpc. But a lot of reactions are trailing that appointment. And of course, joining us now is Dr. Wisdom Enang, a senior energy consultant virtually, to discuss the expectations from the new leadership. Thanks so much, Doctor, for joining us on the program tonight. On a quick one, a lot of expectations on the new leadership of the Nnpc board, and of course, as the president has equally reshaping all board members. A lot of expectation from your point of view, looking at the credibility of those persons that he has nominated, the capacity, the credentials. Do you feel they have all what it takes to get the job done?
Thank you very much, Michael, for having me this evening. I am more than certain that they have what it takes to get the job done. Going by the fact that these folks have, literally championed some of the best initiatives in some of the leading IOC companies. For example, the new group CEO of Nnpc Limited. So there's no doubt in my mind. And there are two things. It's about the experience to get things done. It's also about the contacts to get things done. I'm going to put a little bit of context here. Recall when Shell Petroleum were trying to sell off their assets to divest their assets, they did make a promise that they were willing to reinvest in the Nigerian deep water portfolios if the federal government were going to be kind enough to allow the process go to renaissance, which of course we now see that he's being headed by Tony Atta, which of course has a root from Shell Petroleum. So what you see there is that the contacts as good as the skill set that these folks bring. So they bring contacts and the skills to the table. Now, Michael, the trouble in my mind is how independent are they going to be allowed to work? And I'm saying this very honestly because we've got to be very truthful about situations. The Nnpc has really been caught up playing in an interventionist role. We see the role that the Nnpc played just recently in Afrexim Bank, trying to get loan for the nation. Of course, the crude swap deal, the crude upfront sales that we know typically do, where we get loans and then we get crude back loans. That's what it's called. Those loans are being facilitated by the Nnpcl. So the question is, how much umbilical cord still ties the Nnpcl to the Nigerian economy from an interventionist standpoint? The second question is, how independent are these folks going to be allowed to work and run the initiatives? Or are they still going to be taking directive from politicians? That's going to be a very counterproductive way, bringing smart people and, asking them to do things the way you want them to be done. I mean, that's going to be very counterproductive. You set leadership in the country should set the direction, set the KPIs, provide the enablers, and let the team decide on how best they're going to meet those KPIs. So I think those are the bone of contention that we need to be worried about. But as for the team, they are absolutely spot on. They're very good.
Doctor, there are a lot of call on the new team to revisit the Naira for crude deal with local refineries. Do you feel that should be an urgent priority? Because, prior to the last chief executive exiting from the office, there were a lot of concerns about renewal of Naira for crude deal. We've witnessed a scorch in the prices of the PMS recently. Do you feel that if they quickly swing into action by fixing that Naira for crude deal, there might be some changes on the market?
Yeah, I mean, you are very right. The crude for naira deal did bring some really good benefits to the domestic market. But the only thing is this, right? I think it's important for us not to look at the benefits of something, but also the side effects. I mean, there's absolutely no medications that you would have that doesn't have a contraindication, and the contraindication could be as simple as if you take too much of it, it would be harmful to you. Now, to understand what I'm trying to say, let's look at the opportunity cost of the crude for naira deal. We've got a crude for naira deal, and that crude for naira deal means that we get domestic refining going very well. It's a better way than putting it in consumption subsidies. Absolutely, a much better way. But there's something you've got to understand that we also lose the opportunity to earn the much needed dollars that we need to be able to finance our debt obligation, which are dollar denominated. That even some of our investment ambitions that are also dollar denominated. Equally, there is need to stabilize and increase our foreign reserves and stabilize the FX market. So the crude for naira deal was never going to be permanent. That's the truth. That's why it had a sort of a review date, a 6 month review date. So the question is, what is the much better way of doing things? I think we need to ask ourselves: are we ready to run a maybe a system of a petroleum system in the downstream sector where there's a price fix, or are we going to run a totally free system? If we're going to run a free system, it is a willing buyer, willing seller. What does that simply mean? That simply means that we have, both the imported variants competing very much so with the domestically produced variant. You cannot choose and say, look, on this occasion, we're going to do willing buyer, willing seller. But then, comparatively with the imported variants, we're not going to think about that because it's the imported variants are not there primarily to stifle domestic production. It is there to ensure that we do not have a repeat of what we had in the, let's say, in the cement industry, or what we had in the rice industry, where we have just a handful of people and they determine the prices. That's exactly where you don't want to be. So I think we should also grant some licenses because, I mean, if the imported guys are saying that they can bring in products at 779 and the Dangote is selling at 800 and something, which means we're getting it at about 930 naira for the most part in Lagos State, for example. Let's see if we can have a very good price competition. Just opening up the market and let everything compete. But saying that they could revisit that, they will need to weigh whether the crude for naira deal is creating much more of a side effect than the benefit, or whether the Nigerian government can afford, or the Nigerian economy can afford to deal with the side effects of the crude for naira deal.
A lot of a good one right there, Doctor. I'm concerned about increasing the productivity. It's still a concern, issues of recruitment, training, and capacity building. Do you feel that there are more, approach or a different approach that this leadership should consider in terms of increasing productivity in the sector?
Absolutely. I think increasing productivity in the sector is going to start with actually increasing productivity within the NMPCL, right? And I think, it also has to do with getting the right folks in there and setting the right KPIs. Let me just, pause a little bit and punctuate a little bit and tell you why it is important to get the right folks inside. Now, think about it. In the time past, we probably had a director for refining operations of a refinery. That refinery did not produce any liter of refined product, but then went on to spend a lot on turnaround maintenance. And there were no heads rolling on the floor, and it was acceptable. No one was called in for questioning. That's the sort of KPI that will be kind of productive. So the group CEO of the NMPCL, or the group GMD, if you want to call it that way, of the NMPCL has got a very tough job on his hands. I mean, it's not enough to have a facelift of the board leadership. I mean, you need to definitely, sort of have a rejig within the, sub variants of the NMPCL. Sometimes you may not be able to sack everybody and have a facelift. So I would correct the notion that that a lot of heads will roll. There are some places where you would have to just move people around, send them to more critical areas, and then bring in new folks that have what it takes to handle the tough critical areas. There may be times where you need to retrain people. There may be times where you need to send people on courses. There may be times where you actually have to, perhaps look at some of those areas, maybe the downstream sector, the refineries, and say, hey, look, we cannot run this as a company. Let's privatize it. Those are some of the tough conversations. Productivity means you're able to know and make a tough decision, a tough call on what are your liabilities and what are your assets, and how you can reduce your liabilities and how you can increase your assets. That's essentially what the board has to do right now. And I would not be surprised if the conversation about completely privatizing those refineries come up, because there'll be conversations about whether they're going to privatize the aspect of the operations and maintenance, or they're going to outrightly sell it off. But I think it is just good for them to hand it off and then focus more on the upstream side of things for the benefits of the Nigerian economy.
So you feel that there is a visible benefit of privatizing some of the Nigeria's downstream refined oil sector? Is that the argument?
Yes, I definitely feel, because the idea of the whole reform is to ensure that you're bringing folks who clearly have a handle on things, and anything that is going to be taking so much of energy but bringing very little results, it's going to be taken off. At the end of the day, when you look at the refining equation, the Dangote refinery alone is very sufficient to deal with the supply equation for the nation and a little bit of importation. So it's not critical. If you also look at the role of the NMPC as a sole importer, I think that is dwindling at the moment, because more of the conversation in terms of price, position is being decided by what the Dangote does. This is why I'm saying that if we can grant if we can make some of those import licenses active, then we'll be able to truly tell what is the competitive, kind of nature of, between the market interaction between what the Dangote is doing and what the importers are doing. People would argue that, okay, the Dangote has, a market, export-oriented market that he has set up his, factory or refining stations to serve, and that's fine. But you need to understand that Nigeria is very unique. Nigeria has a lot of population, so whilst you may have to undercut the market with a cheaper price when you're competing with the international importers, we do have the population that still means you'll still be able to net out whatever amount of money that you're trying to still get ultimately. Some of those markets like Ghana don't even have our population. Some of those Cameroon, they don't have our population. So I think they should open up the market, privatize it. Sorry, not privatize, like open up the markets of willing buyer, willing seller, market competition between the international folks at the Dangote, and then we can have a fair equilibrium price. And that way, the NNPCL can completely transition from the interventionist role and start being more of the company just like Saudi Aramco or British Petroleum.
A lot of concern there. A lot of persons have described the recent change in the management as a big step. And of course, Dr. Wisdom have equally also shared that with us on the program. Thanks so much for joining us on the program tonight. We really appreciate you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Happy New Month, and do enjoy the rest of your week and your month. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. A lot of concern looking at the second concerns raised by many experts. NNPCL shares to the public a lot of concerns about the leadership, recruiting, training, and increasing the productivity. Eyes are now on the new leadership to make things work. The Naira to crude is still a major conversation as far as the petroleum and oil sector is concerned. That, of course, is where we'll leave it for now. We'll continue to monitor all of that development and the rest of it to bring you to speed with what is the latest happening in our world. Thanks so much for joining us on the show and the program tonight. Big Talk. We do hope to see you again joining us. Bye-bye for now.